Hello, my name is John Campion and I'm the West Mercia Peace and Crime Commissioner, and a very warm welcome to our latest Safer West Mercia podcast. And I'm joined today by another special guest who I'll let introduce themselves and say where they've come from.
Hi, hello John. My name's Sara Dowling. I am the Deputy CEO of the charity RoadPeace, the national charity of road crash victims.
Really great for you to join us today, and I'm lucky enough to know quite a bit about the work of RoadPeace, and I'm very proud to say as Commissioner I've worked with you in a number of different guises. But for those who are listening who might not know what RoadPeace is, just tell a little bit about the organisation.
Sure, yeah. So as I said, we're the national charity for road crash victims, and basically we exist to support families who have sadly been bereaved or been affected by serious road crashes. And we do that through a number of support services. We have a national helpline. We run a number of local groups. We have a befriending service, which puts families in touch with other people who suffered similarly. And we run a resilience building programme, and we also run remembrance services. So we have a whole range of support services that are there. They're free, they're accessible to anyone who needs them. We're very much based on a peer-to-peer model. It support victims to help other victims. And it's a sort of a key part of our model, if you like. The other thing we do, though, is we are a campaigning organisation. So whilst we recognise that supporting families is absolutely essential, most of the families we work with are just so desperate for others not to suffer in the same way that they have. So we campaign with them to try and bring about changes to the system to reduce road danger and to reduce road death and injury on our roads. Listeners won't necessarily know 5 people are killed every day in the UK, which is a really astonishing number, 60 suffering life-changing injury or serious injury. And so, it's a really big problem that doesn't get enough attention. And I know that's something that we're working together to sort of change that.
Because that's for me one of the key bits. And my journey with RoadPeace started back as a much younger version of me in local government as a councillor, and being invited to the memorial service, the RoadPeace service in my local community. And I remember thinking to myself, why have I been? And then understanding a bit more about it, seeing the amazing act of remembrance that it was. And then as Commissioner, recognising my duty to support victims and witnesses in the criminal justice system. And then I had some contact actually by somebody that's used RoadPeace services around their lived experience of a relative losing their life following a road incident. And it really sparked me in terms of we give support out there to different elements of those who've been involved in horrific situations. But the victims or those around the victims on the road, it's a real stark gap for me. And that journey, absolutely, I think has been quite an interesting one, because RoadPeace is an amazing organisation driven by those who've had direct experience. That corralling of lived and shared experience is really powerful. But the bit that you also refer to over the campaigning, I like that in terms of the authenticity behind it and others. And as Commissioner, you're a great partner to be with, because you often come with lots of the answers in terms of what needs to happen. And I think part of my job is to try and help make more of it happen. Biggest issue in West Mercia from the community is road safety, all the way from antisocial use of the road through to concerns around it. You've been around in this field for a long time. Do you think there are some really simple safety measures that are often ignored in terms of that could provide, I hate the phrase quick wins, but could provide quite quick, simple improvements?
Yes, well, I mean, gosh, it's the big question, isn't it? I think for me, the key issue, and it sort of touches on what you were just talking about, is around speeding. So speeding basically obviously is a massive factor in the causation of crashes. It increases the severity of injury, but it also means you're less likely to avoid a crash in the first place. And I think it kind of ties back to this idea that complacency around road danger, and it ties in also to the fact, road crash victims are hidden victims. So it's this whole area around complacency around road danger, how much we tolerate as a society when people cause road harm. And so I think, yes, I think for me, speeding is the one key issue. And I think that, again, is around changing the narrative around speeding is crime. It's the one crime that people go, oh, well, I was just going a little bit over the speed limit. Well, actually, speed limit's there for a reason. And I guess around that ties back to policing, which is obviously a key area. It's around having enough resources to be able to have traffic law enforcement and to use technology to help us sort of mitigate for the drop in policing numbers. There are other things that can be used, speed enforcement, cameras, dash cam footage, and community policing. So I'm not sure it's a simple, quick win, unfortunately, but I do think it is the really key issue. If we can just change the narrative around speeding and make it as antisocial as drink driving is now, I think there are so many benefits to reducing road harm, reducing road death and injury, but also supporting the shift to active travel, which we need, and fear and intimidation from speeding traffic is a big reason why people don't walk and cycle, certainly in urban areas anyway. I know West Mercia is a rural area as well, but certainly in the kind of urban areas.
I'm of an age in my mid-40s where you buy a bike that's a pedal cycle that's too expensive and quite a lot more than my first car, and on ill-fitting lycra, and do cycle socially. I go out on an evening, on a weekend, and every now and again I force myself to ride to work, ride to headquarters from where I live. I take the same route that I drive along, and it takes me along a dual carriageway. And people ask me which way I come. They say, oh, you don't go down that dual carriageway, do you? And I do, because I've got to believe that our roads are safe for everyone on them, as it were. And I agree with you. I do see, as a cyclist, I see some driver behaviour, which I'd like to think, if that motorist had seen it from my perspective, that they would change that behaviour. And absolutely around some of the other issues that you referred to around technology. In West Mercia, up in Shropshire, we've got a trial AMPR cameras linked to a radar device around an automated community speed watch type scheme through 3 villages on a road. And I'm fascinated to see how we can use technology more and more. How did your RoadPeace journey start? How did you end up getting involved in the organisation and working for them?
Well, I think when I was at a point in my career looking around, and I stumbled across RoadPeace, and I was really struck. I think you mentioned sort of authentic, or maybe integrity, or maybe I'm putting those words on it, but really struck by RoadPeace as an organisation in its commitment and passion around trying to change things. So trying to change the status quo, challenge the status quo, help people, but also campaign for changes that are much needed. And also as a small organisation punching above its weight. And I just really loved those values of about the organisation, and it's kind of what's kept me there. And my own personal experience is as a family, we've also suffered from somebody being killed in a crash. So I think that's sort of, and I was much younger, and I hadn't really connected it at the time, but it really resonated with me. And then just sort of getting to know how the organisation works, how it works with victims, uses their experiences, it's a really powerful driver for change, but it's also evidence-based. So we're looking at kind of interventions that work, and combining that with the victim's voice is just such a powerful story and really effective. And I just really love the opportunity to be part of that.
And that's the bit, isn't it? That getting the gratification from activity. And you mentioned the integrity around RoadPeace and their campaigning element. And I'm often quoted in when I talk about road safety, is that we are complacent about it. I think as a society, we hear of another death, and in West Mercia, it's not quite one every week, but it's not far off in our force area. And I think it's the article in the newspaper that's sad, that kind of gets turned over. And you've been around the subject for a while. Are there some things that we can do more of to help reset that and get that balance understood, and the impact of these events understood by our community?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some systemic issues that need to be addressed, but I think in the community, I think it is around the human story. So I think it's about amplifying victims' voices, getting victims at the forefront of talking about this, about the issues. I think the media has a real role to play. Like, I know you say it's in the media, people turning over, but I think it's the way it's framed as well. It's just a small little paragraph. The language is really important. A cyclist sort of crashed into a vehicle. Well, actually, probably not. It was a driver involved. I think a long-standing campaign of RoadPeace is this as crash not accident, and I think that ties right into the complacency around, it was an accident, there was nothing that could be done. And we actually all know, all of us working in this area know that the majority of road deaths are preventable, and there are hard measures that can happen that will prevent them if there's the political will and the money. So I think, it's around sort of flipping the narrative away from road deaths are inevitable to no, road deaths are preventable, and we can all work together to make sure they don't happen. And everyone has their role to play, whether it's through policing and budgets and having enough money to have enough traffic law enforcement officers, whether it's through investing in post-crash processes so crashes are investigated properly and we learn from the mistakes that are made and feed into preventive measures. Policing crime plan, in my opinion, prioritise road crime and preventing road death. I think the justice system has a role to play. Why don't we give longer and lifetime driving bans in cases of extreme culpable driving, bad driving? As a society, we will confiscate cars for parking fines, but we won't when somebody's culpable in causing death by dangerous driving. So there's a lot of sort of, on the surface, sort of things that we just accept, which I think need to be challenged. And I think that's what RoadPeace is trying to do, is to sort of shift the narrative around the framing of it by challenging these sorts of accepted ideas around the way things work, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. And I was amazed by the lack of support for victims and their families. Part of my national work, proud to be involved in understanding what that is and coordinating how it might improve. There's still enormous gaps. I want to make sure that gets fixed. But I think the bit you pivot to around the public demanding, I think is an important one. It strikes me on some of your references earlier in comparison to drink drive. I think it is antisocial. I think if I were so stupid as to go to drink drive, I think my friends and family group would intervene. They would say, no, you cannot. I don't think it's necessarily the same yet with speeding. I don't think things like mobile phone distraction, we're not quite there yet, and that's why enforcement has got that role. I'm pleased you mentioned police and crime plans. Road safety was in my first one back in 2016, and I was one of a handful in the country. This time round, it's in, I think, nearly half, which is really a real positive step, because I think getting that focus on it is really, really important. And those army of professional road enforcers, because it is a skill, it's not just a standard policing skill, are growing out there. You've referred a couple of times to the services that you guys offer in RoadPeace. If somebody was listening, how do they go about understanding what RoadPeace does, and if they needed any help for either somebody they knew or for themselves?
First thing I'd say is, if this is sort of something that they feel comfortable with, is to give us a call on our helpline. So our number is 0845 4500 355, and it's open Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And out of those hours, there's an answer phone message and someone will call you back within 48 hours. So yes, and the other place I would say is to visit our website. So we've got a huge amount of information on our website, including a description of all our services. We do have a range of guides and information sheets to help families. I think dealing with a sudden traumatic death is isolating. It's absolutely overwhelming, and there's a huge need for emotional support. But I think what some families find really difficult is dealing with the criminal justice system. So we've got a whole range of really useful guides to try to help navigate that process, right from understanding an investigation, understanding charging decisions, going to court, dealing with an inquest, all of those things that a bereaved family can find themselves sort of thrown into. often with no prior experience whatsoever, and it's an incredibly stressful and often aggravating experience to go through. So we've got a huge amount of information on our website as well.
Here in West Mercia, my experience has been very much around the family nature of it, in terms of the extended family through shared experience, and that line around there's always somebody out there that can listen, and always somebody out there that can be some support. And I think RoadPeace filling that space in our community is quite an amazing thing. And I've alluded to a couple of times, as PCC, proud partner with RoadPeace. I know I support with some funding around some particular bits of work. My aspiration is to be able to do more. But the power of the organisation makes it possible, and you guys should be very proud over the decades that you've been involved in doing this, of the difference that it makes. And I want to thank you for your work here in West Mercia and the other national bits. And long may it continue, but hopefully we will get to a point where it's not needed ultimately. And that's where we've got to drive our aspirations.
Absolutely. That was one of the things when I first came across RoadPeace that really struck me, is an organisation that wants to work itself out of existence ultimately. But in the meantime, we are needed. And also thank you for your sort of pioneering investment in the service that we offer in West Mercia. And I don't know, it might be worth sort of just recapping on what that is. We have a caseworker that works out of the Victim Advice Line, which is the victim service in West Mercia, dedicated to helping victims of crashes, whether that's a bereaved family, someone who's been injured, or witnesses as well, and working really closely in partnership with the police. And it's just such a brilliant example of working in partnership, where we each bring our own sort of skills and strengths. And the impact of that is that families are getting really timely support really early on that's appropriate to their needs. And it's such a brilliant thing. So thank you so much for enabling that to happen.
You're making me blush, Sarah. But one of the reasons why I set up the Victim Advice Line to be based in with the police in their control room environment, and why the additionality that RoadPeace caseworker does being embedded into that team, it struck me in moments of grief and huge life-changing events, is that often people are being asked to tell their story multiple times. Having you guys embedded in that central team, for me, a real no-brainer and a great addition. And as I said before, it should only be the beginning of what we can do together. So really grateful for you joining today, Sarah, and talking about some of the great work RoadPeace, and really grateful to those listeners to today's podcast. We will include the links to how you access some of the service that have been referred to if you're affected by any of the issues that we've talked about today. My message is clear to you, that there is always somebody out there to hear, to listen, to perhaps understand some of the things that you will have experienced following incidents on the roads in our force area. And as I say, Sarah, a huge, great big thank you from me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me on today.
And that's the latest Safer West Mercia podcast.